Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
While the country has a debate around medical and recreational varieties of cannabis, that non-drug industrial hemp varieties, bred for seed and fiber, let them out of the drug war. The Obama administration has worked in bad faith. They have refused to meet with, for instance, the North Dakota delegation from the governor on down. They're ready to grow hemp under North Dakota law. I mean, they see Canadians, right across the border. And this president prides himself on science and rational-based policy approaches, and it's so sadly hypocritical. I'm putting myself in jeopardy and basically saying, look, it's just been incredibly disappointing for us. We had such hope. And as an Illinois state senator, he voted twice for hemp cultivation.
Call us at the spreadsheet, okay?
Reefer madness shall be buried. American farmers will grow hemp again. Hopefully it'll be a piece of the puzzle here of ending prohibition sooner versus later. I think we're all fed up, but I think the country's shifting.
Hi, I'm Willie Nelson, and I urge you to support the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act to regulate marijuana and restore industrial hemp. This initiative will end adult marijuana prohibition and let our criminal justice officers focus limited resources on real criminals and not on marijuana users like me. ACTA will also allow farmers to grow hemp for fuel, fiber, and food, to create jobs and help our economy. Please support ACTA. Thank you.
From K2 News, this is your voice, your vote.
And you may soon get to use it to decide whether we should legalize marijuana. Oregonians 21 and older could smoke it, grow it, or buy it in an Oregon store under a measure proposed for the November ballot. Already, it's got some big-name support.
This initiative will end adult marijuana prohibition and let our criminal justice officers focus limited resources on real criminals and not on marijuana users like me.
Legalizing marijuana may always be on Willie Nelson's mind. Should it be on yours? Today on Your Voice, Your Vote. And good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Dunn. Petitioners need to collect nearly 88,000 valid signatures by July 6 to get the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act on the November ballot. One supporter says they're already nearly 2/3 of the way there. That person is chief petitioner of the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, Paul Stanford, and representing those who think we should not legalize marijuana, Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Markey. Thank you very much, both of you guys, for being here this morning. Paul, why do you want Oregonians to legalize marijuana? Tell me that.
It's our largest cash crop. It is already here to stay. It's much safer than alcohol. There's no reason to treat lawful law-abiding adults as criminals for using marijuana. I think regulating it will take it out of the hands of the children and substance abusers who control it today, put it in state stores where the age limit's strictly regulated, and enhance public safety, allow law enforcement officers to concentrate on real criminals.
Josh Markey, you agree with any of that?
Almost none of it. It's basically the Let's Make Paul Stanford Even More of a Millionaire Act. He's done very well with what used to be called the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation. He operates, I think, some clinics and dispensaries where 99% of the people, according to newspaper reports, who apply get it. So think of almost any other kind of so-called medical facility where if you go in and say, you know, I really think I need some oxycodone because the pain's bad. And let's be realistic. In Oregon, since for almost 40 years now, the possession of less than an ounce of marijuana has been an infraction. You can't go to jail for it. It doesn't go down on your record at all. We have made decisions in Oregon to massively decriminalize marijuana. What this would do is basically say, no, we're going to basically allow, and you have to read this, we're going to allow the growers to be the members of the, I think it's called the Oregon Cannabis Commission, and by the way, Paul says there's going to be penalties. Well, it's like $250 if you give it, or if somebody under the age of 21 buys it, or if you gratuitously give it to somebody under age 18, it's a Class A misdemeanor. So in other words, a 30-year-old man who gives marijuana to a 15-year-old girl, it's a misdemeanor. Right now, that's a major felony, and I think a lot of parents would be concerned about it. Marijuana is not the demon drug that it was claimed to be in reefer madness, but this goes way too far.
Paul, let's talk about the clinics that you help patients get approval for medical marijuana cards in Oregon and other states. Your website even says those clinics have helped 100,000 patients get permits for it. If people...
I've got to say
Go ahead.
that we only approve about half of the patients that contact us. It's not anywhere like 99%. We require medical records in advance. We review those medical records, make certain the patient has a history of one of the qualifying conditions. Then based upon that, then our doctors set appointments, and then they come in and see the doctor. However, I am not a millionaire. I don't even make $100,000 a year. So I make less than that. So.
Well, you hear it all the time. I know you do, Paul,
Sure.
that people say, you know, anybody can get a medical marijuana card these days. I've got an aching toe or a bad neck, whatever the case.
That might work in some clinics, but that doesn't work in our clinic.
So what are the stipulations then, as far as your...
You have to have one of the qualifying conditions, whether it be cancer, AIDS, chronic pain is the largest single condition. Usually that involves some sort of compressed or fractured vertebrae in their back. Those are the conditions for medical marijuana. But what we want to do is actually put those clinics out of business and to allow adults to grow their own without a license and to regulate the sales and put the money in the hands of our farmers and our local economy.
Here's what the proposed Oregon Cannabis Tax Act of 2012, or OCTA as they call it, allows. Adults to have marijuana, adults to buy marijuana at state licensed stores, adults to grow their own marijuana, licensed farmers to grow pot for state licensed stores. Now, we asked K2 Facebook followers whether they think legalizing marijuana is a good idea. We got this reaction from a woman named Lori. Lori says, bad idea. Why not legalize heroin, cocaine, and LSD while we're at it? Do you people think this is going to help? We already have enough drug addicts and kids of addicts as it is. Now some folks think we should just say, okay, go ahead. We're truly a state that is nuts. You guys want to respond to Lori? Why don't you start out, Paul? Go ahead.
We want to take marijuana out of the black market, which will lessen people's access to these other truly dangerous drugs, and to treat marijuana as it deserves to be treated, as a substance that's safer than alcohol. And I really believe that once we do legalize and regulate the sale of marijuana, then the industrial products made from hemp, whether it's fuel, fiber, or food, those are going to dwarf the drug market and create thousands of sustainable jobs here in Oregon.
Does Paul have a point? Does it take it out of the black market, Josh?
No, it won't, for a couple of reasons. If you think about all of the other drugs, including alcohol, and alcohol is a certain drug, and if alcohol came about today and you described the things, it would probably be at least a Schedule II drug, meaning that doctors would have to license it. But unfortunately, it's in our culture. When we had tried to prohibition, it failed enormously. But In 1998, voters in Oregon were sold a bill of goods. They were told that to be compassionate, there are people who absolutely will benefit from marijuana medically. People with wasting syndrome associated with AIDS, people with nausea undergoing chemotherapy, people with glaucoma. There are something like, Paul knows the numbers far better than I, over 40, over 50,000 cards. Oregon has more per capita than California. 90%, 95% of the people do not have the conditions that the original proponents told us that was going to be. Now, basically, the most common one, and again, Paul can contradict me, is severe pain. And so and my drug cops tell me all the time, they've given up really trying to prosecute any marijuana cases because everybody comes up with a marijuana card. One of the things that they're going to talk about is Willie Nelson, who doesn't have any association with Oregon other than coming through occasionally. He and his entire entourage, they all have medical marijuana cards. I think they can have as much as a pound at any one time. We're talking about an enormous amount of dope. And one of the questions, I think Lori's right, just because alcohol has become a poison and a terrible, affliction on our society, and marijuana probably isn't as bad, but do you really want to be driving with your family back after a ski trip on a rainy, snowy night on Highway 26 and know that the person who's driving a semi the other way has just had a dose of their medical marijuana? I don't think so, because people driving cars have to have 100% of their wits. And, Steve, we cannot measure all of the alcohol, oxycodone, benzodiazepines. We can measure whether that drug is in their system and about how much. Marijuana is unique. It's fat soluble, and we can't tell if somebody smoked a joint 2 hours ago, 2 weeks ago, or 2 months ago.
We sent our camera to the streets of Portland. Put comments on this particular subject. Here's one of the responses. Let's play that.
I don't even think we would notice a difference. It would be business as usual. The government might get some extra revenue, and a few people might get stoned. So what?
What do you think? Business as usual? What do you think?
I couldn't hear him, so that made it something of a difference.
He said, I can read it. I don't even think it would make a difference. It would be business as usual. The government might get additional revenue. A few people might get stoned. So what?
Well, here's the problem. Again, take all of the kinds of intoxicants that exist in the world. Alcohol, methamphetamine, opiates, all of these are relatively complicated to make. Yes, you can make methamphetamine in your garage. Unfortunately, people do. I don't think anybody here is advocating legalizing meth. Yes, you can make hooch. It's not easy. The one thing that makes this make no sense at all is marijuana is a weed. It grows, the viewer was right, it grows everywhere. So if we have these stores, and which are run essentially by growers, according to this, and by the way, have the Attorney General enforcing it, I've got news from Mr. Stanford, the Attorney General has no original criminal jurisdiction in the state of Oregon under the Oregon Constitution. Only the 36 DAs like me do, and that's just not in there. But the fact of the matter is, people who don't want to go to a government store, a government-regulated store, they're going to continue growing it. There's going to still be a black market for it. It's just not going to go into Mr. Stanford's pocket and people like him.
You heard the gentleman.
Well, I'm not trying to put it in my pocket. I'm trying to put it in the hands of the whole state economy. I think that no one is not using marijuana because of the criminal law. There's not a big line of people waiting to use marijuana as soon as the law changes. It's not going to really impact that. What it will do is it will put it into the legitimate market and regulate it and let the true science come out on it. You know, when's the last time there was a St. Valentine's Day massacre? It was back when alcohol was prohibited. We don't see that happening with alcohol today. It will take the criminal element out of it and enhance public safety.
What about Josh's comment he made earlier? I want you to respond to that, where he said you're driving down the road after a ski trip with your family, and there's the guy in the semi who's just smoked some medical marijuana. Your thoughts about that?
Well, it's not going to just be medical marijuana. It's going to be adult social use of marijuana, and they could be doing that today. In fact, they're more likely to do it. Since we've legalized medical marijuana, the use of marijuana by those under 18 in the state of Oregon has gone down, and it's gone down in every state that has allowed medical marijuana. Making it a medicine doesn't make it more attractive to youngsters. What we want to do is regulate it. Right now, youngsters have easier access to it than many adults. We want to change that.
Isn't the concern, though, if you do legalize marijuana, you will have more people behind the wheel who have just smoked some pot?
I don't believe so. I think that the people who want to smoke pot are doing so today.
All right, here we go. Another K2 Facebook follower brings up this point. Trish says, I think it should be legalized. If it's legal, it should be treated like alcohol, not at work or driving. And this also means the police can focus more on the hard drugs that are the real issues in our society. Your response to that, Josh?
Well, let's be clear. When we're not spending a lot of time, and Paul actually sort of touched on that, we do not have marijuana strike teams in Oregon like they do in California. You have to remember something else, is that the federal government has something called a supremacy clause, and whether it's the Obama administration, which also, by the way, doesn't tolerate it, marijuana is a Schedule I drug. Now, I wrote an opinion piece in the Oregonian about 8 years ago. If marijuana is a medicine, then treat it as a medicine. In other words, let doctors prescribe it and administer it not through some bizarre group of, stores run by the growers, but through pharmacies, if it really is a medicine. And I think it really is a medicine for some people. But the fact of the matter is we're not spending, you can't go to jail in Oregon, well, you can't go to jail at all for possessing less than an ounce. If you're caught with 1.5 pounds of marijuana, a judge can't give you more than about 10 days in jail. We're just not spending our resources on it now.
You want to respond to this?
Medical marijuana is something that we have today, and our initiative will make it where adults can use marijuana. So it'll also put it in pharmacies, where at the doctor's prescription, they'll be able to go into pharmacies and obtain it. There just needs to be a legal system to do that. The state of Oregon has already taken marijuana off the Schedule I narcotics, so it is a Schedule II here in the state of Oregon, or at the legislature's behest, the Board of Pharmacy set it as a Schedule II. There's just no legal access to it. Under our proposal, patients will get it at cost through pharmacies, and what's sold to adults through state stores will be taxed, and medical marijuana won't be taxed.
Well, but I got to respond, Steve. The problem with the scheduling is when this came before the Oregon Board of Pharmacy, Paul and other marijuana advocates wanted it to be a Schedule V, which is what cough syrup and diarrhea medicine is, where you can get almost unlimited refills. Schedule II is, and the other part is, I'm sorry, but no doctor who has, if you ever get a prescription, you'll notice there's a little thing called a DEA number at the top. That's what allows the doctor to prescribe controlled substances, which marijuana is a controlled substance. Currently Schedule I, any doctor that writes a prescription for marijuana, this is one of the great frauds of the Oregon medical, oh, I have a prescription for it. No, you don't. There is an exception in the criminal law for if you can get a doctor to say, I think Steve Lumbago could really benefit from a good joint. And you take that card down, and that all they're going to do is check and make sure you're Steve Dunn, you're over 18, and you live where you say you are. They're going to give you a card, and you can get all the marijuana you want. So I think, as one of the viewers said, why pump so much more of another drug that may not be certainly as harmful as alcohol or heroin or methamphetamine, but do we really want more drugs in more people's hands?
I want to make clear my lumbago is fine, by the way. But, Paul, the OCTA website says legalizing marijuana will increase public safety, restore respect for the law. How so?
It will take it out of the black market. Currently, people try marijuana and see it's not nearly as harmful as alcohol, and so this will set up a reasonable standard of control and regulate that market.
Here are some of the concerns expressed by people we talked to out on the streets. Let's play this one.
My gut reaction is I don't like the repercussions of any drug being available to anyone, especially those who could have the tendency to abuse.
Additional impairments made legal don't seem to make sense to me.
Did you hear any of that, Josh?
Yeah, I did, and I think they both make a good point. The idea is, the fact of the matter is, I grew up in Southern California in the 1960s. I went to the University of Oregon in the 70s, and our viewers, if you say a lid, only those over the age of 40 will know what I'm talking about. A lid used to be about an ounce of marijuana, and it sold for about 10 or 15 bucks. And if you smoked marijuana back in about 1971, you had to smoke most of a joint in order to get high. That's because the THC content, the tetrahydrocannabinol, the cannabinoids, which are the active ingredient that is the reason that people do that instead of smoking banana peels, has gone from 2% to as much as 25%. And the cost of marijuana and on the free market as it is now runs anywhere from $200 to $1,000. Paul also said, oh, law enforcement is resources are being wasted. Not in Oregon. But if you look to the southern borders, where we have absolutely no control, we have a basically narco-terrorism war going on in Mexico. A lot of it over marijuana, where policemen and judges are being killed, their families are being wiped out, basically because of the demand in the United States. Now, I don't think letting more people smoke marijuana, and this, by the way, people should read this law. This basically says that we have to change, that somehow Oregon can change the international conventions to which the United States is party, and you just can't do that.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to respond before we go to break here, Paul. Go ahead.
We impose a system of controls mandated in international treaties. So the licensing scheme that we outline in our proposal is actually lifted from the international treaties. Also, we set up a system of findings by the people as to why we can depart from federal control. And the Controlled Substances Act, which is Title 21 of the U.S. Code, at Section 903, says that states can regulate controlled substances differently. So even though we have federal supremacy under the Constitution, the Controlled Substances Act says explicitly that states can decide to control it differently.
We talked about this a little bit, but you hear people say, just legalize it, tax it so the state can make some money. But is that really the reality, or are they just blowing smoke? That's coming up next.
From K2 News, this is your voice, your vote.
Welcome back, everybody. This morning we're talking about the possibility of a ballot measure that would legalize marijuana in this state. We asked what you think, and some of you mentioned it might be a good source of revenue for the state of Oregon.
Yeah, they'd have to have it set up like the liquor stores. The liquor stores for that, then they would have to have dispensaries for that. So there's going to be some administrative costs, but I think the return, would be worth it to help out the state revenue.
Paul, you think this is a good moneymaker, don't you?
We think it'll raise $400 million over a 2-year biennium.
And where do you get those numbers?
From Harvard economist Jeffrey Myron. He made that estimate. And so 2/3 of that is revenue into the state, and $120 million of that $400 million would be savings in criminal justice costs, like the DA of Clatsop County wouldn't have to spend any more time on marijuana prosecutions when it comes to cultivation for personal use anyway.
Josh, he's making your job easier for you.
Well, I could probably repay you right now with a $10 bill for the amount of money that I spent prosecuting personal marijuana consumption in Clatsop County and pretty much the other counties. The fact of the matter is, I don't think we want to become the stoner state even more than we are. The fact of the matter is, marijuana is widely available. It is, in fact, a drug. It is, and if it is a medicine, as Oregonians were sold, the whole idea of the 1998 Marijuana Act was not to commercialize it exactly as Paul is suggesting. It was the idea that it's so easy to grow that you give people cards and let people be caregivers. And as Paul himself pointed out, it's not hard to come by. All this will do is cause an explosion of more of a drug, which under certain circumstances probably isn't that harmful. But I don't want people driving under the influence of it. And if people should look at this law and see what the penalties are, they're anemic. They're virtually non-existent.
Let me ask you a question. If we're not really prosecuting it now, why not just make it legal then?
Because we are sending a message saying, it's okay to use a mind-altering substance and presumably to our kids. If I could wave a magic wand, I would get rid of alcohol. It's probably way more dangerous than marijuana. We already took steps. In 1973, we decriminalized it. The idea of kicking the door open. The other thing we cannot get away from is the federal government, whether it's under Obama or somebody else, is simply not going to tolerate this. What he's talking about the Controlled Substances Act, is states have the ability to become more tough and restrict more, like we did with pseudoephedrine because of methamphetamine. But we don't have the right to legalize drugs that are illegal.
What do you think? Obama folks going to go along with you?
I think that we have created a bill that will be upheld in federal court. And a lot of this debate has been going over the Medical Marijuana Act. And what we want to do is go beyond that and take the stigma out of marijuana, allow it to be a real medicine that doctors can prescribe through pharmacies. We specifically designed this to be upheld in federal court, and I believe it will be upheld.
Going to take another break, come back right after this. Welcome back. Before we go, I'm going to give each of our guests a chance to say why they think marijuana should or should not become legal in this state. Let's start with Paul Stanford. Go ahead, Paul. You have about 40 seconds.
Well, you know, he said several times that he should read this law, and I really believe people should read this law. If they do, they'll find that George Washington cultivated hemp and even received a package of hashish, he said, was a real curiosity that he would make more time for. Thomas Jefferson invented a device to process marijuana stems into fiber. And Willie Nelson's been arrested the past few years several times for marijuana. They're arresting Willie Nelson. He would have George Washington and Thomas Jefferson arrested. And they'd be turning over in their graves if they found out about this. I really believe that marijuana is a bellwether issue for the future of freedom. If the government can prohibit this harmless substance, then the future of freedom is indeed dire.
Your final thoughts, Josh Markey?
Coca-Cola originally had cocaine in it, too. That's not a good reason to make cocaine legal. There is really no stigma attached to the use of marijuana in the state of Oregon. First, we were convinced 14 years ago to be compassionate, to have medical marijuana. We did. Now we have more per capita marijuana cards. 19-year-old skateboarders say, oh, I got a pain, boom, they go to one of his clinics, they get it. Do we really want to become known as the state that is going to push another intoxicant off on the public and blow the doors open and be known as the place where the state of Oregon is going to make money? As they said in this, it is a relatively non-addictive drug. Compared to what?
We shall see. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here this morning. Appreciate it. We'll see if you get your signatures. We'll follow this story very, very closely. Have a great rest of the weekend, everybody. See you on Monday.
Prohibition cannot be enforced for the simple reason that the majority of American people do not want it enforced and are resisting its enforcement. That being so, the orderly thing to do under our form of government is to abolish a law which cannot be enforced, a law which the people of the country do not want enforced.
In the 1980s, "just say no" became the new phrase of an old propaganda campaign. But it wasn't just Republicans beating the drum of war. In 1986, Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, a Democrat, saw getting tough on crime as a means for his party to win the upcoming elections.
In the 1980s, I was the attorney in the U.S. House of Representatives, principally responsible for writing the drug laws. In the only time in my 10 years at the House of Representatives, we had a bill that we were considering that had never been introduced. There were no hearings. There was no expert input from the Justice Department, from the federal judges, from the Bureau of Prisons. We were literally flying blind. And this legislation ended up creating long mandatory minimums of 10 years mandatory up to life imprisonment, when the prior maximum had been 20 years. To say that you deserve up to a year in prison to possess marijuana, that is, to possess it for the purpose of using it, is preposterous. It's totally unjust. How these sentences get imposed is completely random on one hand, and on the other is very much related to what your social class or race is. These laws fundamentally fail the test of justice. As I look back on it, as 30 years as a lawyer, this has been, if this were intentional, this would be the most shameful thing I could imagine somebody doing as a lawyer. It's terrible. It's terrible to live with. That's why, it's critically important, I think, that people like me speak out and say, these laws are wrong. They're counterproductive. They're unjust.
In between the blues, there are good days and bad days, with everything and nothing to lose. while the setting sun never sits, and the night has no limits. The void between freedom and free, dealing with the unnatural reality, a need to see, a need to be. Grass fire, my DNA needs THC.
Grass fire in a world at yours. That's the way this fire burns. Like a grass fire.
In the unnatural society, been trying to maintain, while the sane appear to be clearly insane, with no way to explain. Outlasting the great lie, a sparking spark does my mind. Grass fire, pulling the sky, breathing in sativa's design.
Grass fire in a world at yours. That's the way this fire burns. It's a grass fire.
The void between freedom and free, dealing with the unnatural reality, a need to see, a need to be. Grass fire, my DNA needs THC. Dreaming of long times past, all that those times brought, looking to the heart of tomorrow. Grass fire in a world that yearns, that's the way this fire burns.
Well, what is cannabis? Cannabis, of course, is a medicine.
I think it's important to say that no medication is going to work for everybody all the time.
It's a specific for migraines, it's a specific for seizures. The take on the plant is that it's symbiotic with the human.
If you can get something that's natural, that has literally zero side effects.
Yet it works as almost a ubiquitous inhibitor of a lot of systems in the brain.
The science is absolutely clear. The pharmaceuticalization of cannabis is just beyond the horizon.
I think it's easier for men to come out and say they support it because women have a lot more on the line. You know, if they're mothers, then they have their kids on the line.
So I tried it, and at first, it freaked me out. I had a few panic attacks.
We know that cannabis can prevent Alzheimer's, and if it can reduce all these ailments and keep your stress level low, that adds years to your life before you're even sick.
And so the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate fascists lead SOBs vilified the cannabis plant.
We're all grown up now. We're not in the closet anymore. We don't give a fuck what you think. We smoke marijuana.
But once you just let go with it and just be, it does so many things.
This consciousness opens the doors to perception, expands consciousness, and puts you in a receptive state.
I like to say when I give lectures, I start off by saying I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
Part of what we're doing with Oregon NORML is trying to maximize the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act and try to help the patients that truly need the medicine.
America's ready for a change in the marijuana laws. We're reached critical mass to change this critical mass.
Let's hope we can all live together in peace and harmony, love, and legalize marijuana, for God's sake.
Well, and whatever's going on in this dimensional reality, we'll never outfight them. It's about outthinking them. It's about outthinking them. Just think about that, right? About outthinking them. Alternative energy, power, alternative energy, conscious live thought, the process of thinking, energy. We are the alternative energy that can make the change to happen. But we really have to understand what this means. We really have to get it and understand it, then we become that power. The power of the people doesn't have shit to do with the vote or any other thing. It's got to do with thinking with a clear, coherent, intelligent mind. Use the intelligence clearly and coherently. How much power do we have? Can you make yourself feel miserable with your fears and your doubts and your insecurities? If you can do that, you have power. Simply put. All right? So it's just a matter, but that's power used incoherently and chaotically. So just think, some mental shifts here, and use that power clearly and coherently, and real change. This is the power of the people. Like this Cannabis Tax Act, you vote, but the voting is like using it as a tool. You know, you just use it as a tool, but your power isn't there. Powers in here.
But what I want to just put this out or think about real quickly is we want people to think about the realities of alternative energy, helping the land, helping the farmer, a green economy, alternative energy, all of the buzzwords that the political system keeps throwing at us but has no substance behind it. We want people to think and consider the identity and the realities of industrial hemp as an alternative energy solution to the problems that plague this planet. Hemp will help the farmer, it will save the farmer, it will create an environment, a fresh air environment that is healthy for this planet. Industrial hemp. We're not talking about marijuana. This is about industrial hemp. This is about helping the farmer and all of the things that hemp can do. And if nothing else, remember, it makes fresh oxygen for a carbon monoxide filling sky, and it does it on an annual basis. It's a renewable energy, and it sustains us. It was the largest cultivated planet. It was the largest cultivated crop on this planet up until the 1880s. Then around the discovery of oil, because hemp could do everything that oil can do and more, and do it safely without pesticides, without attacking and destroying the land. They outlawed marijuana a long time ago, but it was the hemp that they were after, because the hemp could sustain an alternative economy. Thank you. So please think about it. Think about it. Think about it and do what makes sense. All right. Give us this day our daily yeses. Yes to life. Yes to living. Yes to caring. Yes to giving. Yes to creating. Yes to thinking. Yes to clarity. Yes to balance. Yes to being. Yes to seeing. Yes to yeses. Give us this day our daily yeses. Chaos, confusions. Confusions, chaos. Desperations, despairs. Despairs, desperations. Program, belief. Belief, program. Manipulated minds. Minds manipulated. Reactions, behaviors. Behaviors, reactions. Fearful thinking. Thinking fearful. Inside. Outside. Altering thought. Thought altering. Forgetting medicine. Medicine forgetting. Clear thinking. Thinking clear. Coherent. Coherence. Coherency. Coherent. Prayers given. Given prayers. Peace and love. Love and peace. Created realities. Realities created. Whatever sees. Sees whatever. We do. Do we? Give us this day our daily yeses. Yes to yeses. Yes to seeing. Yes to being. Yes to balance. Yes to clarity. Yes to thinking. Yes to creating. Yes to giving. Yes to caring. Yes to living. Yes to life. Give us this day our daily yeses.
Thanks. You know, it was about 2 years ago that 2 years ago yesterday that Jack Herer gave his last speech from this stage. Jack Herer wrote a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes right here in Portland back in 1985. We call this stage the Jack Herer stage. And, you know, today is also 9/11. So it was 10 years ago that a lot of people died back on the East Coast. And so we're coming up on 420, and we just want to remember a couple other people. Dr. Todd McAree also got to talk from this stage. He wrote a book about cannabis. And Ben Mazzell, a famous Wisconsin activist, spoke on this stage last year, and he passed away earlier this year from cancer. So I don't want to give anybody a bummer here at 420. But we're here to mark important occasion. You know, we want to see hemp restored. Hemp is one of the oldest crops grown by people. Everybody agrees that marijuana was among the first few crops that people started growing at least 12,000 years ago. And it produces more food, protein, that meets human nutritional needs better than any other protein out there. It produces more fuel, biodiesel fuel from its seeds, and ethanol from its leaves and stalks. And from these hemp stalks, and this is the official hemp stalk of hemp stock here, 3 years old. From the stalks, it produces more paper, more fiber, more building materials than any other plant. So we're here to legalize hemp, and we're doing it through an initiative petition. There's a petition booth right over there. I want to urge you guys, if you're registered to vote, to sign the petition. If you're not registered to vote, now is the time. We've got to take control. It's your duty, you know. You can't stand around and say, when are they going to legalize marijuana, because they're never going to do it. We're going to have to do it, you know. It's going to take us all working together, you know, no doubt about it. It's not going to happen, you know, unless we all get out there and represent and educate. So I urge you to sign the petition. If you can, get some signatures on the petition. There's some petitions over there. And, you know, are you guys ready for 420? Yeah! Well, you know, it's less than a minute away, according to my clock. So, you know, we're here for freedom and liberty, too. You know, our right to our freedom of consciousness, to be happy here on this planet, is one of the other things we're fighting for. You know, right now, there's really a rapid growth in genetic technology and gene information. There's rapid growth in nanotechnology as they miniaturize all sorts of things. There's a rapid growth in artificial intelligence. Within a lot of our lifetimes, most of you guys out there, computers are going to be pretty darn smart. And if we don't protect individual rights, then the future is dire. You know, things like the Matrix and the Terminator are possibilities. So we have to protect our right, freedom of consciousness, and expand natural individual rights. And I think marijuana is a bellwether issue on that. The fact that they've taken the oldest crop, the one that produces more fuel, more food, more fiber, and more medicine than any other plant, and they made that one illegal, it's wrong. So we're going to have to get active. I'm counting on you. Happy 420, and we'll be back. Restore hemp.
Vivian, thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. My God, look at all of you. This is fantastic. It's taken a long time, but we're finally at this point. I work with Voter Power, manage their Portland Patient Resource Center. I'm also working with the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative, one of the 3 legalization initiatives currently circulating in this state. 3 chances, 3 opportunities to change the world. Just getting one of those on the ballot will send a message across the country. Pass one, and we've changed everything. And it's all up to us, and we can make it happen. I started working in this state years ago. My good friend Paul Stanford and John Sajo and I and a lot of other people put something called the Oregon Marijuana Initiative on the ballot back in 1986. It was fantastic. And you know, back then, this was just a dream. No one ever believed that we'd have millions of people around the country safe because they're medical cannabis patients in legal states like the state of Oregon. We never dreamed it could happen, and it did, because we've never stopped trying. We've never stopped believing. And that's what it's all about. If you're a registered voter and you have not yet signed the initiatives, do it now. Only sign once, but sign each of those initiatives that one time. If you're not a registered voter, register. And if you're not a registered voter because you're too young, thank you for being here. Pick up information. Go to these tables. Go to the nonprofits. Get their information. Get their literature. You're here to learn, my friends. Because if this were an anti-nuclear demonstration, if this were about healthcare, the environment, and the economy, anything else, we'd have newspapers filled with pictures of you and how proud they are that you're taking an interest in politics, taking an interest in making social change. And instead, we're going to get shots of kids smoking joints. But yo, the joint is not the point. We got to fight for our right to party, and that means we need you to be educated. We need you to educate your parents and your friends. Get the literature, get this information. It's never too young to start being serious about making this a better world. And that's what this is all about. This is a movement powered by love. Oh, and it's also powered by money. You'll see people around gathering donations to a lot of great groups here, the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, which is the primary sponsor, and of course all the others, Oregon Normal and such. Give. You bought that glass piece, it's great, you got an extra $5 left over. Donate it to a good cause, because that's how this kind of stuff happens. That's how this kind of stuff happens. I want to thank all of you and all the people who make this possible, because this is how change happens. You're beautiful. Thank you.
Doug McVeigh from Voter Power's Patient Resource Center and also the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative. And Doug's right, the joint's not the point, but for every joint that dies, a roach is born. And that's the truth.
I get a nice little buzz from it.
That buzz comes courtesy of the federal government. An Oregon woman says she's part of a little-known government program that supplies her with free marijuana. Since the mid-1970s, the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program has been supplying free, legal cannabis to a handful of people. The program officially ended in 1992, but 4 patients still receive pot. Our Christina Nelson sat down with the Eugene woman who is part of that program.
You might call it her morning routine. With her lighter in hand, 72-year-old Elvie Musica gets a cannabis buzz every day, courtesy of the federal government.
It does give you a push. It makes you... The high is nothing but feeling good about things.
This grandmother, who uses cannabis for her glaucoma, is part of a very unique club.
These are the tins that the government sends to the University of Miami, and I have to go there and see my doctor, pick up a prescription.
Since 1988, Musica has been getting more than 3.5 pounds of pot every year from the federal government for free.
And this is what they send me. I call them my green Pall Malls.
She's part of the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program. It started in 1976 after a man sued the government, claiming only pot helped his glaucoma. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, or NIDA, provided rolled joints for sick people until the first Bush administration halted it in 1992.
But every single one of us had to have reliable doctors that they would count on, extensive medical records. I eventually became the first woman to join the 2 men who were smoking legally at the time.
The program has been closed for almost 20 years, but the FDA still allows the remaining 4 patients, including Musica, to receive the free cannabis.
And I'm just so glad I found this. I really take it in a spirit of Thanksgiving every single day, and I do.
Christina Nelson tells us the marijuana is grown at the University of Mississippi, and then it's taken to Florida, where Musica picks it up every year. She is also an Oregon medical marijuana card holder and receives pot through the state as well.
And the question of hemp, the question of cannabis, is the most vivid illustration of how this government has overstepped its bounds in policing the private behavior of citizens. When they told us we couldn't plant a hemp seed in the ground, they severed us from the natural cycle. That is what they seek to do. I call it the synthetic subversion, where they want to replace all the natural products on earth that used to be grown out of God's earth and God's seed, and replace them with synthetic products and knocked our farmer out of the agrarian society and the agrarian market and made the ghost towns of our small cities and villages across this country. We need to rediscover a cash crop, one that will allow our farmers to go back to the land, one that will allow our farmers to compete with the petrochemical pipelines. You plant U.S. 7% agricultural land in hemp, you will have to import another drop of oil. We can replace the spills in the Gulf. We can replace the environmental catastrophe that the petroleum pipelines have cast upon Mother Earth, and instead let our farmers grow hemp as a fuel crop. In 1991, Willie Nelson and I poured hemp oil into my Mercedes diesel and drove it across Kentucky in my bid for governor. That's why he started his biofuel plant. Listen, folks, you all have been handed a torch. Jack Hare, bless his soul, passed away. I'm getting old up here. You know, we cannot carry this ball much longer. You have to become educated. You have to learn the truth. You have to reach out there and grab the responsibility of maintaining your freedom. Every generation must re-win its own freedoms. And those very sacrifices, right up to the very last second I've been talking to you, made on your behalf, cannot continue anymore. What really counts is your all's commitment to what sacrifices you're willing to make in the future to maintain your freedom. And it's right there in front of you. I encourage you to learn the law. I encourage you to learn the political process. I encourage you to reach out there and take responsibility for your own freedom. Live your life like a warrior. God bless you all. Thanks for having me out here in Seattle.
Hi, I'm Willie Nelson, and I urge you to support the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act to regulate marijuana and restore industrial hemp. This initiative will end adult marijuana prohibition and let our criminal justice officers focus limited resources on real criminals and not on marijuana users like me. OCTA will also allow farmers to grow hemp for fuel, fiber, and food, to create jobs and help our economy. Please support OCTA. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all you guys for watching. We will be back next week, same time, and help us restore hemp. Good night.